Hey, what is up? Welcome to this episode of the Wantrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian Lofermento, and I'll tell you what, I get to interview so many incredible entrepreneurs for a living, and I talk to them both on the air, but also off the air, and those conversations are so special, and I will transparently share with you today that there's a trait and an attribute and a habit and a skill that I see so frequently in the most talented entrepreneurs that I get to interact with that I don't think we talk about often enough. And that's why I'm particularly excited for today's episode, because I am so confident that today's guest really deeply encapsulates this one trait that I think we should all start paying attention to. And that trait, if I had to sum it up, is the ability to step back, recognize, and identify patterns in life, patterns in business, patterns in behavior, patterns in outcome. And trust me, today's guest is such a superstar when it comes to all of those things. And it even reflects in his business. So let me introduce you to him. His name is Victor Costa. Victor is the founder of Vocalis, where they help organizations operate at their best by transforming organizational challenges into sustainable growth opportunities through the 10 pillars of harmony. I'm so excited for all of us to learn about that, which is Victor's and Vocalis's proprietary method. The method itself is a product of 15 years of professional experience doing consulting projects for more than 40 companies in more than 20 countries in 12 different sectors. In this journey, Victor has not maybe seen it all, but he certainly has seen a ton. He's seen mergers and acquisitions, family businesses, big multinationals, startups, and young companies. And I really love something that I saw Victor write somewhere, is that he doesn't know if he found the answer, but he certainly found an answer. And it's going to be really exciting to dive deeper into his journey. So I'm not going to say anything else. Let's dive straight into my interview with Victor Costa. Victor, I am so very excited that you're here with us today. First things first, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Oh my gosh, what a great host. I'm super excited to be here too, Brian. Thanks for having me.
Man, well, you know, I got to geek around with you a little bit about my very limited Portuguese before we hit record today. So you're going to have to, obviously, você brasileiro, so you're going to have to give us a little bit of your background. So let's start there. Take us beyond the bio. Who's Victor? How did you start doing all these cool things?
Perfect. All right. Well, I'm 35 now. Born and raised in Brazil, São Paulo, Brazil. Shout out to the Brazilians or Brazilian enthusiasts. But graduated in business, and I say that now I'm in my third career cycle. My first was right after I left college. I did some work in marketing research for a big American corporation, actually. I was a big numbers guy, but I'm also a people guy. I went the numbers route first. That didn't last too long. Switched to banking because all my friends that were in banking were buying cars, and I could barely pay, to go out. Did a little bit of that, didn't like it. It wasn't for me, too many numbers. And then I found out about consulting. And I didn't know much about consulting, but that's where I did most of my career in my first cycle. I worked for a big management consulting firm. They're a Brazilian firm that made it international. They had offices in Germany, the US, UK, Argentina, Mexico. Had a great experience there. I think through work, I was able to, as you said, haven't seen it all, but I've seen quite a bit. Big M&As, family businesses, multinationals. Through work, I got to live in Mexico, in the US, in the UK, in Spain, in Indonesia. And it was a great career. But at around 2017, when I was promoted to manager, I started to feel this void inside. I think we all can relate to that moment in life where something feels off. And as a good consultant, I was just trying to solve it as a math problem in my head. Just, you need to, do something with your routine or with your diet or find something else. But quite frankly, it was an existential crisis that I couldn't ignore. And I think the root of it was there's a lot of important sides about myself that I had completely left behind. Ever since I was 4, I loved playing the piano. I play the piano still to this day. I'm super connected with music, with arts, with everything creative, and I wasn't doing anything about that. And on top of that, I was super frustrated with the way I was seeing the corporate world and how things were headed. My last project was in Indonesia for that company. And we were there to essentially double the size of the business in 5 years. And I remember seeing everyone was just burning out. A lot of the interviews we would do with people from the company, they'd say, well, I've been here for 2 weeks and my boss has been here for a month. And I started really questioning what I was doing in that segment. Of course, it's important to help companies grow, super important, but I felt like we were neglecting something deeper, as if we're not paying attention to the foundations. I think that was the beginning of my journey to recognize patterns, as you said. It all boiled down to a kind of frightening experience. I had a panic attack in Indonesia, sort of lost grip on reality. So that was really eye-opening, because it made me realize that this crisis that was experienced, it wasn't just a passing feeling, it was something that I really had to pay attention to. And I don't think back then I was equipped enough to dissect it and make a smooth transition. So I just left it all behind. It was a very glamorous life. On that project in particular, I was living in a 6-star hotel paid by the company, something surreal. I remember when they did my check-in, they did it in the room, not at the front desk. And they asked you all sorts of questions, like, what type of pillows do you prefer? I'm like, what types of pillows are there? I don't even know. So super fancy, super bougie, so very glamorous on the outside, but there was no meaning there. So went back to Brazil in a 15-minute call. It felt super quick, but I quit that job, sold my apartment. I was in a relationship back then too. That didn't work out. So I literally left everything behind. And the only thing that would give me meaning was to read philosophy books, old stuff, ancient cultures, comparative religion. And I thought, you know what, maybe there's some clue here. I was very surprised by the fact that there's stuff that has been written over 2,000 years ago, sometimes 3,000 years ago, if you go to Indian philosophy, for example. And we're still trying to figure that out. And I began to think, is there maybe something not necessarily old, but maybe timeless that we have forgotten about? And would the answer to our timely needs being those timeless patterns, as I call them? So that was the beginning of my journey. And I found this little school in Los Angeles, California, that offered a degree in liberal arts, covering philosophy, psychology, comparative studies of religion, everything that I liked about it. And I said, that's it. Let's go. I bought a one-way ticket, enrolled. And of course, when you trust your heart, everything turns out to be okay, except for the fact that I got there and the school shut down. And they were like, nobody wants to study that. We don't have enough students. We're a brand new university, but this didn't work out. The school's shutting down. And I said, well, now what? This ended up turning into a whole journey of me in California. I ended up enrolling in filmmaking at UCLA. What does it have to do with business? I don't know. What does it have to do with Victor? A lot. I loved writing, directing, composing. I really reconnected with all this creative side that I had left behind. And I realized that as soon as I went back into being in alignment with who I really am, I started to feel this flow of life once again. And I felt lighter and I felt better. And I thought, you know what, maybe there's something to well-being, that it's about just being aligned. There seem to be these timeless patterns of life out there. And whenever we're not aligned with them, things feel heavy. It's as simple as that. We say it all the time. We say, oh, I have this weight on my shoulder, or I'm so heavy. And then you just have a conversation with Brian, this great host, or with a friend or whomever, and you say, wow, I feel so light now. It's as if a weight was lifted. What is that? That is real. And that has been felt for thousands of years. And towards the end of my journey in California and exploring filmmaking and stuff, I ended up reconnecting with startups in California. And I saw them dealing with the same issues, burnout, stress. And I thought, well, there's something, would corporate well-being have something to do with this notion of internal alignment? If you think about health, for example, we can decode health as physical health, mental health, social health. These are the pillars recognized by the World Health Organization. What are the pillars of corporate health? What are these patterns? And if we were able to decode that, could knowing about them and knowing where we are in alignment or out of balance, could that help us then find balance? So that was the beginning of, let's say, the whole theoretical background for Vocalis, what I do now. So we can dive more into what we do, but that was the end of, let's say, my second big career cycle, this whole period exploring creative arts and getting to know myself. And now I say I'm in the third cycle, which is with Vocalis, with my company, which I started 2 years ago. And it's been a really fulfilling journey so far. We're quite small in size and scope, but to me, the meaning of what we do, the depth and the value that we add is what brings me fulfillment and enjoying what I do.
Gosh, Victor, the hardest part for me about today is going to be that inevitably we're not going to have enough time, because already just in that overview, I mean, I'm sure so many listeners are falling in love with the way that you articulate things. And there's 3 thought threads that were just dancing happily in my mind as you were sharing these things with us. Let's see if I can remember all 3. The first is that what I really appreciate so much about your story and your backstory as well is that you trust going deep in so many different directions are going to take you closer to what you call those timeless patterns, those timeless things that life is all about and business is all about. Because all too often we as entrepreneurs, gosh, we obsess about business because we love our businesses, of course, but we think that all of the answers are found within business. And so we read business books, we consume ourselves in our business. And what I love about your story is that you said, I want to get into filmmaking. I want to learn about different cultures. I want to do all of these different things. And within there, you started to build what has become your entrepreneurial DNA. Listeners know all my cheesy solo Sunday episodes, they're usually not about business. They're usually about tennis or chess or soccer or watering the plants. And it's because I learn more about myself and in turn about my businesses doing those other things than I do when I'm just in the thick of it. And the second thing that I really want to call out is you remind me of an archaeologist. Is that if you and I wanted to find the answers to life, I mean, we could sit there and we could speculate, or we could start digging. And what I'm really hearing about your attitude is that you believe that if you want to find answers, well, there's answers to everything, but you have to be willing to dig to find them. And that digging means you're not necessarily going to find things on the surface level. If you and I were doing an archaeological dig, we might be like, oh, there's the answer. No, but keep digging. Brush away all that dirt. You never know exactly what you're going to find. And then the third thing, we've got to jump straight into your 10 pillars of harmony, because hearing the way you talk about it, it reminds me of, I saw an interview with Ed Sheeran, who's for sure my favorite musician. And Ed Sheeran, he was in a lawsuit once upon a time where certain artists were saying your music sounds just like ours. And Ed Sheeran in that court case played a bunch of different songs with the same 4 chords. And he said, there's only so many notes in the world. Everything in life is just a different combination of these exact same things. And hearing the way you talk about, you call these timeless. And I love that because I think about my 102-year-old grandmother who came from the mountains of Albania with no electricity, no running water. She didn't have a smartwatch when she was living. She didn't have a smart heart rate monitor. She just did the timeless things. If you eat your vegetables, you eat right, you move every single day, it's always going to work out for us. And there are those timeless things. And that's why I'm so in love with your 10 pillars of harmony. I could start reading those attributes for listeners and they'll be like, yeah, I want to aspire to that. Yeah, I want to focus on that. Yeah, I want to move in that direction. But Victor, you take us there. I want to hear about the 10 pillars of harmony from you.
Sure. Thank you, Brian. And the music is a great analogy. I'm also a big fan of Ed Sheeran, so we have that in common. I think a lot of us do. But you're right on. So there are billions, if not trillions, of songs, and they're all made of the same 12 notes. It doesn't mean that every song is the same, that we have to be the same, but there are these universal patterns, let's say, the musical notes. And my quest in business was exactly that. What are the universal patterns in business? And they're quite intuitive. They're nothing out of this world. So I'm going to break them down for you. So I grouped them into 3 different dimensions. One is a dimension that is structuring and more rational. These are the pillars of order, the pillar of knowledge, and the pillar of responsibility. So order is what makes things work. In order, I talk about structure, roles and responsibilities. So think about, you invite people over, just to give you an example of how simple those things are. You invite people over to cook at your house, and you want to cook steak, whatever, and vegetables. If you don't agree on who's going to cut the vegetables, who's going to grill the steak, it's just chaos in the kitchen. So surprisingly, the same goes for business. If roles aren't aligned, sometimes if there's no internal agreement of what we do, companies don't function. So pillar of order is what makes companies work well. Responsibility is about keeping things fluid and efficient. Here I'm talking about processes, having a results-oriented vision. How do we make things better? How do we improve? And knowledge is the ability to resolve things. Now, if you're a more rational person, I guess you can easily relate to those pillars. You think, oh my gosh, that's my life. I love order and knowing about things, and how can I make everything more efficient. But we are very interesting beings, and there's a whole other set of pillars that connect us with reality and with the things that we cannot control. These are the pillars of service, change, and communication. Service is all about meeting needs. And every business is meeting a need. And how well you meet those needs is going to determine how good of a business you are long term. Change relates to the inevitable fact that we do not control reality, and we do have to adapt. AI, sustainability, all these trends, what do they mean to me? What do they mean to my business? How am I going to adapt? How am I going to position myself before those trends? What's my strategy? Communication, how you keep all relationships leveled. So those are 6 out of the 10. And what keeps them together are the 4 pillars of people, which are self-responsibility, our individual ability to balance our relationship with work, collaboration, the ability of us coming together, purpose is the vision that keeps a business in movement, and integrity, the last pillar, is the ability of leadership to keep everything together. So if a company is lacking order, a leader should go there and fix it. If a company is lacking change, a leader should go there and fix it. So integrity is about literally bringing everything as a whole. The root of the word integrity means wholeness, bringing it back to one. So I know it's quite a lot to take in, 10 pillars. I think the objective of the podcast is not to do super deep dive, but an example of how that can be so effective for companies is I just did a project with a super big client, startup that became a unicorn in less than a year, backed by a VC, over $350 million in investment. And their internal environment was a bit chaotic, and they were just going back to traditional checklists. Let's understand what's going on with our culture, with our employee value proposition. And they hired Vocalis. I did my assessment, and it turns out the issue was not culture at all. It was governance, which is related to order. They were too focused on what we want to achieve and not paying attention to how we're going to get there. And they were unstructuring the business. It was just a race against themselves. And I said, quite frankly, you guys can't revamp your culture and rewrite your values and do whatever you want. But none of that is going to be effective unless you address your governance. And that's what they did. And they changed it. And in 2 months, the company was completely different. It isn't magic. It's just because they understood what was out of balance. They went to that timeless principle that we can find in every company and just tuned it. And then everything falls back into harmony. So that's kind of the breakdown of the pillars and a little bit of, let's say, the way we work with other companies. We do an assessment. Based on that assessment, we can understand what's in and out of balance. And then with that, by becoming aware of it, we can make choices. Nothing that what I do is forced. Everything is based on awareness and choice. So this is the issue. What do we want to do? Do we want to fix it? Great. Do we not? There are consequences. So, and that's true for I guess every business and every one of ourselves too. Things happen in our own time.
Gosh, Victor, I always argue with people that I have the coolest job on the planet because I get to interview incredible entrepreneurs and visionaries such as yourself. But it sounds to me like you have a very cool job as well, because the phrase that comes to mind is you can't read the label from inside the jar. So frequently we think this thing is off in our businesses. And I would imagine that your work is fun because you get to ask the right questions, you get to poke the right places, and you get to find all these different things. It takes me back to a lesson that I learned at a tennis clinic many years ago in Southern California. And Victor, here I was mid-rally, mid-point against my opponent, and I was feeling good. And then I found myself at the net. My opponent hit the ball right to my feet. I couldn't get the half volley off, and I turned to my coach on the sidelines, and I was like, Megan, like, what did I do wrong there? It felt like I was in the right place for that volley. And she said, Brian, you were fine where you were at the net. Your problem was 4 shots ago. 4 shots ago, you hit it to your opponent there, which allowed him to do this. And I thought, wow, I was looking at my point of failure, which was that final stroke. But the real point of failure came so much earlier. And it must be fun in your line of work uncovering those types of things. What do those conversations look like for you to find those? Because I feel like we all have those blind spots, and especially, the points of failure may not even be in the direction of which we're looking. Is it really good questions that you ask? Is it exercises? Are you interviewing different parts of the company? I'd love to hear how you result in where those true spots are.
Sure. Thanks for asking. So my whole first project experience takes 6 weeks, but the results come out in 3 weeks. And how do we do that? Are there tons of interviews? No, it's actually just through one questionnaire that takes 30 minutes to fill out. And the power of the method is I spent 2 years decoding all of this, and there's some statistical analyses that I run. Everything is based on mathematics, nothing against AI and the power of AI, but everything I do is just purely mathematics. There's a statistical method that I use that identifies relationships of cause and consequence in the variables that I measure, and that's how I'm able to tell what is in and out of balance. And the most interesting thing is through that analysis, I can also map out what is the narrative that is holding everything out of balance. So as you said in your example, your problem, your coach said, was 4 shots ago. Typically what we're experiencing in the company are just the symptoms of something deeper, and typically they're tied to a narrative. We pick villains and heroes and victims. Oh, this VC is so mean and they want us to achieve results, but we can't, so we're the victims, but our CEO is the hero and he's going to save us. And these narratives, they take a life of their own, and they're really hard to tame if you think about it. Companies double down on strategy and culture and business plans, but story is really what binds us. Story is what gives us meaning. And if a company is not actively managing their own business story, those narratives take over. So my method, obviously, I don't just spill it out. I do the deliverables in waves. And the first wave is just with the CEO of the company. So I bring up the results and I bring the narrative. And my first question is this the story you want to write? Your business is so valuable. Every business is an art. Every business starts with a journey. I think we see that story here in your podcast quite a lot. It starts with a dream. It starts with a vision, something you want to build in the world. Is this the story you want to tell? And if you ask that same question to the leaders and the people involved in the business, they'll probably say too that, no, that's not the story we want to write, this narrative of conflict of villains and heroes. We're on the same boat. That's the reality we often forget in business when we start to blame other departments and to pick up those fights internally. We're all here to do the same thing and to find joy in doing it. And if you make this metaphor bigger to the world, it's the same. At some point, we got to learn how to respect one another and how to really come to terms with the fact that we can be extremely different as human beings. And that's my vision of the future. I dread uniformity or conformity. I think we should be allowed to be extremely different from one another, yet still united by those same patterns that we all share. We all want to be loved. We all want to be taken care of. We want to care for others. We all want to build something meaningful. So this is the type of conversation I have with the companies. I said, what is the story you want to write? And if you do want to write a different story, this is what needs to be fixed. And that's when the pillars come in and how we can look at those issues more objectively. You got to fix your pillar of order, your governance, or this or that. And the last wave, by week 6, when we present the results to the entire team, the results already come with the action plan that was discussed with the CEO and with the leadership before, which is really great for change management then, because you started the process without clarity of what the issue is, and you ended with, now we understand where we are, and this is what we're going to do, and we're all going to do it together. So, and I think that's the thing that my clients love the most, is it's a very actionable methodology. It's very quick. But I say I don't have all the answers. My role is to point out what is off, and I do work hand in hand with the company later to design the solution if they desire to do so. But frequently, companies, once they understand what needs to be addressed, they kind of take it on their own, and if they feel capable of implementing it, and the engagement is there, because now everyone is aware of the narrative we want to move away from and the story we want to move towards.
Yeah, gosh, Victor, I have to call this out. I want to squeeze in my final question that I ask at the end of every episode, but before I take you there, I really just want to call out that as someone who interacts with entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs every single day of my life, and I love it, it's how I have so much energy, because there's so much good energy that flows in entrepreneurial circles, I constantly find that life, just like business, is a constant battle between ego and using ego in its healthy and productive ways, but also understanding ego's challenges and the very boundaries that it might set us up for. And really what I want to call out, something that I admire in your entrepreneurial mind and just you as a person so much, is that oftentimes as entrepreneurs, we build ourselves up to believe, or at least exude, this air of, I have the answers. You can trust me because I have the answers. Victor, it's been so much fun interacting with you, because I feel like you just show up ego-free, just saying, no, I actually, not only do I not have all the answers, but I know that I don't know all of the things, but I can probably find them, or I can help you find them. And I think that that's such a powerful trait. And you call out how much your clients love how actionable it is, but I would imagine that that's also part of the magic of working with you, is that exploratory process. You talk about leaning on mathematics, you talk about leaning on all of these other things that you bring to the table. And I think that's part of the excitement for them, is peeling it off. I keep coming back to the archaeological dig when I think about the work that you do and how much fun that is. We all did it in school when we were kids, how much fun it is to explore. Oh my gosh, this is a femur, and you never know exactly what you're going to be brushing off. So I think huge kudos to you in the way that you show up there. I don't know how you're going to top a lot of this stuff for your final answer, but I always ask this question, and that is, what's your best piece of advice for listeners, knowing that we're being listened to by both entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs at all different stages of their own growth journeys, and also knowing that you are one of us, you are a fellow entrepreneur. What's that one thing you want to leave them with today?
Well, I remember in film school when I did my first short film with no budget. It looks really bad. I mean, it's just a student project, but I felt great joy doing it. I felt so free, and it has so much meaning to me. And I truly believe that everyone is an artist. I believe that everyone listening to this podcast is an artist. And if you talk to any artist, they'll tell you that it's not about how great you do it, it's just about doing it. There's art as in performing, when you're hired to play a role and you have to perform it well. But there's art as art when you just add your own personal input to what you're doing. How can I make this bright with my own brightness, with my own value? And I think the world today is so numbed by performance. We're just playing this short-term game against ourselves. I mean, what are we doing? Performing. But I think the world needs artists. We need real artists. We need people that are willing to add their personal input to what they do. And I believe everyone is capable of doing it in a unique way. And if I can leave anything to this audience, is I'm normal as everyone else. There's nothing great or extraordinary in me, really. I'm just really trying to do my best in what I love. And I would encourage everyone to do the same. Just do your best. Believe that you have something unique to give, and you are an artist, and you are needed. I think that will be the message.
Yes, I love that message. And Victor, especially when we pair it with the work that you do, I know that listeners are going to leave this episode absolutely lit up because you've got to drop some links on us. I love the way that you lay out all the timeless patterns that you found, how you help your clients, so much goodness that is exuding from even your website. Obviously, we've had the great pleasure of getting to know the person behind the brand and the vision here in today's episode, but I'm very excited for listeners to go deeper into all the incredible work that you're doing. So you owe us some links. Drop those links on us. Where should listeners go from here?
Perfect. Well, I guess you can all find me on LinkedIn. My LinkedIn profile is Victor-Vocalis, Vocalis. You can send an email to our business, hello@joinvocalis.com, and you can visit our website, www.joinvocalis.com. And there's a book coming up. I'll release a book on a little bit of my background on the methodology and some of the lessons I've learned. It's going to come out next year, and I am going to do giveaways. So if anyone's interested in the book, just send an email to us at hello@joinvocalis.com, and I'll be giving away 10 books for free next year.
Yes, I love that. And listeners, you already know the drill. We're making it as easy as possible for you to find those links down below in the show notes, no matter where it is that you're tuning into today's episode. I see all these crazy places that people are tuning into podcasts these days. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and a whole bunch of podcast players that I've never heard of, but you all find us there. So check the show notes. You'll find Victor's links down below, including a link to his personal LinkedIn, a link to his website, and hey, I already know I want my hands on that upcoming book. So stay in tune with all the great things that Victor's doing. Otherwise, Victor, on behalf of myself and all the listeners worldwide, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you so much, Brian. Thanks, everyone. Great being here. Thank you.